I remember when I was young, I don't know, 4 or 5, no, 6 or 7 years old maybe. Behind our neighborhood, like behind the row of houses that I lived on, there's a big open field. And that was an awesome thing as a kid because a big open field that was not developed yet was full of hills and trees to build tree houses in and all kinds of stuff. And at 6 or 7 years old, it felt massive. I've driven by that area since, and it's not massive. But at the time, it felt like this big, open, epic place to play and do whatever I wanted. Covered in ant hills and all kinds of stuff. There's also an irrigation ditch that was really dangerous, but they put up a fence, and we knew not to go by that ditch. In fact, some days I remember there was crazy rushing water going down that ditch. It was kind of scary. But we played in that area a lot growing up, and there were a lot of older kids in our neighborhood that played night games all the time. Tag, Ghosts in the Graveyard. I'm sure every neighborhood has their own brand of night games. And there's something kind of magical when you're a kid about being able to stay up late, maybe a little past your bedtime on the weekends, and it's late and it's getting dark, and you're playing night games with all the kids in the neighborhood. And there's something kind of eerie about it too, because if you play hide and seek, you're supposed to be alone. And so, you play hide and seek, and all of a sudden you go run off behind a tree or in a ditch or something, and you're by yourself, and you're thinking, ha, they'll never find me here. And then it dawns on you that you're alone, and it's dark, and you're like, maybe I don't want to be here, and, depends on the kid. Anyways, I owe one of those nights to a neighbor boy because he saved me. Didn't save my life, but he saved me. Very interesting thing happened. We were playing games where we were just running all over the place, and I was one of the youngest kids playing, so I couldn't keep up with anybody. I couldn't remember what the game was, and I remember being scared and kind of like, man, I really want to keep up with these other kids, but I'm smaller than them, and I don't know what's going on. But I wanted to be cool. I wanted to do what they were doing. So I was running after them, and maybe we were playing tag. I don't remember. Anyways, they all kind of disappeared behind this hill, and I could hear their voices off in the distance. And I was just kind of blindly running. I was trying to catch up to them, and all of a sudden, without even realizing it out of the gate, I was strung up by an old fence, an old barbed wire fence. Now, I'm sure most of you have seen the typical barbed wire where they're two wound wires with, two barbs about every few inches. Now, this wasn't just a barbed wire fence. This was like an old barbed wire fence that had been kind of jumbled up in all these pieces, and so there was big clumps of barbed wire. The effect of this is that I wasn't just stuck by a few pieces. I was stuck. My jeans and my t-shirt were absolutely stuck. I panicked, so I started to wiggle, started trying to get out. I could feel the little barbs digging into me. I remember this. This was a long time ago, but I remember feeling this fear. All my clothes and my pants and my shirt got strung up even more. And I started to cry out, and nobody heard me. I was crying out. At this point, I was probably bawling. And there was a family of kids that were kind of punks. I mean, most kids are punks, but there was kind of a bunch of brothers that were not the nicest. And the eldest one was the nicest, but they were like the throwing rocks over the fence kind of brothers. But I owe that night to the eldest brother. He was probably 13 or 14 at the time. And nobody heard me for minutes on end. I was struggling, and I was already bleeding, and I had all these barbs stuck to me, and I couldn't get out. And he came over the hill by himself, and he had heard me. And he went, oh my gosh. And so we ran it down, and we had to take my shirt off. I had to get out of my shirt, and my shirt was still strung up. And then I had to get out of my pants, which out of context is weird, but that's the only way I was getting out of that situation. So he had to walk me home in just my underwear, covered in barbs and blood, and help me get home. And of course, when my parents saw me, I want to also say that this was not my parents being negligent. This is what we did in the 80s and 90s. We just played out in the fields and stuff. That's what you do when you're a kid. And, this isn't some lesson that necessarily taught me anything. It's just an interesting story. I'm really grateful for that dude that saved me from that. Little 7-year-old Joe stuck to a barbed wire fence.